Good morning, good evening, whoever you are, wherever you are, whatever you might be doing. We wish to welcome you to the Silverlight Show. The Silverlight shines to illuminate that which lies hidden in darkness. For those of you tuning in today, we welcome you in. Well, some very unanticipated news on the economic front. China's exports fell to zero. Now, this is to be expected. Like I referenced earlier this week, there's so many container ships waiting to come into port. There's so much of a backlog that, yeah, naturally people aren't putting in new orders because they're still trying to get the old orders fulfilled. While China is frequently portrayed as this economic aggressor and, any negative adjective that you can think of about their government, the truth is they're filling a need. Cheap stuff is difficult to produce because imagine if you wanted to produce, you're going to start a company and you're going to produce miniatures, little miniature, whatever, toys. And with the technology that's out there today, yeah, you can do it. But then you're going to have to start considering your costs, your labor, what you're going to pay to the engineers that you want to design this stuff. Because, yes, you can start designing things by yourself, but sooner or later, people are going to want more and more. Let's look at Pokemon, for example. They start off with like 180 of them, and now there's thousands of them because if it's a good enough product, people want more. But what this export slowdown from China is telling us is that people aren't wanting more at the moment. They're wanting what was already promised to them. So, what are the worldwide ramifications of this situation? Quite significant. China, South Asia, China, Vietnam, India, places like that, have the ability to mandate low-cost labor, much in the same way that the United States did in the 1800s when they were working people in sweatshops. Great Britain did the same thing. Most people who went through the Industrial Revolution did exactly that. They picked some things that they were really good at, worked people to death for insane amount of hours per day, and it took the actions of activists and unions to make it so that you have a 2-day weekend, that you have benefits and holidays. People working 14 hours a day in a factory. They were required to buy their stuff from the factory shop, which of course was overpriced. And if you were lucky, you would get a couple hours off to go to church. This is why, while I condemn practices in China, I kind of understand where they come from. We've been there, we've done that. Whereas if it's a big enough company like an Apple or a Google or somebody that wants to manufacture their latest smartphone, I do put a little bit more condemnation on them because they know the atrocities that are taking place and they're turning a blind eye to it for profit. That I don't agree with. But what China is doing is perfectly in line with what everybody else has done. And like I said, to set your business up over here, you're going to buy a couple 3D printers because 3D printers are not the fastest things. You have a fantastic idea for a new line of children's toys or even garden tools, whatever you have imagined. And then you got to have somebody go out and sell them, whether that's you or somebody else. Not everybody has the gift of sales. You want to have somebody watching to make sure those machines are printing all the time because 3D printing is still a developing technology. It's not perfect, but that's okay. And you're going to need somebody to take your calls, schedule your appointments, do all that sort of work. That's a lot of salary and real estate to invest in a business. Even if you take advantage of offshore services, it's still a fair chunk of change to invest. So what does this have to do with China? Well, they were standing in for a lot of those services. They were able to make you something like this at a ridiculously low price. In 2012, I was sourcing various things for a charity event, and the local company needed a month to come up with samples, whereas the Chinese company, and it was a Chinese company, was able to have a sample on my desk within a couple days. And they were half the price. It's awfully hard to buy local when there's that big of a difference. And I was working with somebody else's budget, so I couldn't really enforce my morals on it. So yeah, I gave them the 3 estimates, the committee picked them, and that's what happened. But if China is not able to sell goods because people are not able to get their goods, and if you have a hamburger in front of you, you're not going to order a hamburger for tomorrow because that's tomorrow, and that hamburger will be stale by the time you get it. That means that the manufacturer is not making excess burgers. Well, it's the same with China. Yes, there's going to be an export market for whatever the next iPhone phone is, whatever the next Samsung is. Those are going to happen. But all the other things, we don't necessarily need them right away. And that's going to cost people jobs in China. As we live at an interesting time in history, to quote the famous Chinese curse, that means people in China are going to have fewer chances at jobs, fewer chances to support themselves. Just as Ukraine and Russia are suddenly not going to be able to produce as much grain because they're involved in a fratricidal war. So whereas the other day I was fairly bearish on the future, saying it would be 36 months before we sorted these things out and years to clear the backlog, now I'm saying we are on the verge of a systems collapse. Now, the good news is it's not doom and gloom. The world can survive this. We can make things better. The problem is there's not that long-term planning in Western nations that you see in the Eastern nations. This does have an advantage. It's a nimble economy. If you launch 2 products, then one doesn't sell and the other one doesn't, then you know to keep the one that sells and get rid of the other. Whereas a planned economy, they've got to churn out however many units of the not popular product just simply because they were geared up to produce them. The disadvantage is if we have a famine or bad harvest or anything like that, people start starving and prices go up. The scary part is we haven't had a famine and prices are going up. And if Chinese labor, which is dirt cheap and doesn't offer a whole lot of benefits, if they don't have a place to sell their services, that's going to have untold repercussions on their economy. It is a command economy, make no mistake. But command economy or not, ultimately it comes down to the people on the ground having food in their bellies and a roof over their head. Notice I didn't say clean water to drink. That's one of the things that we seriously need to work on in this world. This Chinese economic export slowdown is a symptom. And just like a doctor with a patient, you explore the symptoms. Chinese exports are down. Ships are backed up in every single port imaginable. I'm starting to hear more and more complaints about people waiting for their goods. And like I said, if I'm waiting for this model product to come through or this model product to come through or anything, I'm not going to buy a second one. I want this one to come through and then see how it fits. If you ordered a muffler for your car, same thing. You don't order a second muffler. you wait for the one that you ordered. It's simple logic. But this simple logic is actually causing a worldwide slowdown. We've been through this before. In 2008, in the 1980s, 1930s. It comes up every so often. The question is, how many people can survive and continue to be productive? This is an interesting question, one I don't have answers for yet, but again, the next 12 to 36 months, with rents going up, with imports being almost ridiculous to get in, I think it's important we all pay attention to what's happening. So, we hope you enjoyed this episode of the Silverlight Show. If you did, please hit like, share, and subscribe. Don't forget to check out the books in the description down below. That really is the lifeblood of the channel, and yeah, it's where I get to examine things in a more long-form format or just tell an entertaining story, one or the other. But most importantly, we hope you have a fantastic day.